Welcome back. We have a lot in store today. The January transfer window opens, I've overhauled the youth teams, and we've signed the single greatest member of staff possible. Let's start with the youth teams. This was something I always planned on doing, but hoped would not be necessary until at least the end of the season. The disastrous B team registration, or lack thereof, and the underwhelming youth intake preview have somewhat forced my hand. I must give a shout out first to SteinkelssonFM and his wonderful The Ajax Way blog over at View from the Touchline. I've added a link below which I heartily recommend, as there is a similar principle I'll be using that he explains so much better than I ever could. The principle I am talking about is small squad sizes. Ajax's youth teams consist of 16 players each, with a specific breakdown of roles. This helps develop players with the versatility to play within Ajax's system, ensures everyone gets sufficient game time, and allows coaches to dedicate their efforts towards individual training plans. To see how Steinkelson does that with Ajax, head on over to the link in the description. I am not looking to be quite as drastic, but if we take a look at the B squad here, we can see that we've got far too many players on our books. 32 to be exact. Now 4 of those are out on loan, with Quagliata due to return in January after an underwhelming spell in Brazil. I want to get this down to 18 players. 2 goalkeepers, 5 centre-backs, 3 wing-backs, 3 defensive midfielders, 2 attacking midfielders, and 3 strikers. Now ideally, all 18 would be players that I thought had a chance, however slim, of eventually contributing at a Greek Super League level. That is not the case. By my reckoning, we have perhaps 5. Dimitris Monasterlis is a 19-year-old keeper who is already an adequate shot stopper, with good reflexes and agility, but needs to improve basically everything else. Zisis Sikos is a midfielder with decent technical quality, who kind of answers the question, what would Zealand look like if he was Greek? In the under-19 squad, we have Dimitris Kotas, a centre-back who is already a good defender, but lacks physicality and ball-playing ability. Kostas Goumas, an 18-year-old ball-winning midfielder, who already scores well in terms of club DNA. And finally Stefanos Simas, who has already made some sporadic first-team appearances. An encouraging physical profile for a target man, who needs some technical development. Those under-19s have been promoted to the B team, and we will retain a further 13 who, truth be told, will just be filler. The rest will be transfer listed, or, if we can't find a buyer in January, have their contracts terminated. And this is what the B team squad looks like come the end of January. Far more streamlined, and I have now also taken over training for both youth teams. They will be following the same schedules as the senior side. I showed this very briefly in the very first episode, but now is as good a time as any to drill into them further. There are 3 schedules: a single game week, a double game week, and a 0 game week. I'll use the single game week to explain what's happening here. The 2 defensive sessions and 2 technical sessions are chosen specifically for their secondary focus. In these sessions, the secondary unit will work on their individual roles, ensuring we are giving plenty of time for players to develop the attributes most appropriate to what they'll be doing on the pitch. This is also the primary focus from match practice. The possession session focuses on our 3 technical core DNA attributes: first touch, passing, and technique, whilst the shadow play sessions focus on our 2 mental DNA attributes: decisions and teamwork. It is also balanced evenly between the defensive and attacking units. Now, I've done no tests. I do not know if this is a particularly effective approach, but if you've learnt anything about me by now, it's that I care more about concepts than optimization. I should also touch on individual training. For senior players, they are trained in their primary position and role within the tactic. For youth players, we are a little bit more general, with our focus being on roles that should encourage those core DNA attributes. Centre-backs are trained as ball-playing defenders, wing-backs as complete wing-backs, defensive midfielders as deep-lying playmakers, attacking midfielders as advanced playmakers, and strikers as complete forwards. All players under 23 are given an additional focus that is changed each month. In August, November, February and May, the focus is on ball control. September, December, March and June, the focus is on passing, and October, January, April and July, the focus is on defensive positioning or attacking movement, depending on the player's position. Players over 23 will then be candidates for learning traits. I have not firmed up my plans here yet, nor have I set up mentoring groups, and that is something I plan to do in the summer once the squad is a lot more to my liking. That is as good a segue to talk about transfers as I'm going to get. For this, we need to go back to the beginning of the month, or more specifically, the end of December. Have you ever seen that film Memento with Guy Pearce? You know, the one where it bounces between the start and end until it meets at the pivotal moment. This is like that, only worse. Here is our squad as it stands, a reasonable size and quite balanced. We do have a handful of players, however, whose contracts are due to expire at the end of the season. Zivko Zivkovic, Burina and Tyson will have a combined age of 109, so it's time for them to move on. Actually, I would have been keen to extend Tyson for another season, but he wants a 50% pay rise, which isn't going to happen. Thomas Merg would also be on this list, but we've managed to sell him for a modest €350,000 to WSG Tirol. Stefan Schwab's contract is also due to expire, but his contract demands are a lot more amenable, and so we've offered him a new deal. We are also set to lose loanees Thomas Kajura and Marcos Antonio, while Sualaho Maite's loan has already been terminated. I'd love to keep Marcos Antonio around, but it's unlikely we'll have anywhere near the €6 million required to trigger the optional fee. There is no fee baked into Kajura's deal, and his market value is also a little too high, so we'll assume both players are gone. There are also some players on borrowed time. Magomed Odzoev arrived in the summer and looks to be a decent player, but we concede 0.81 goals per 90 when he's on the pitch. That is considerably higher than any other player. Then there's Ivan the Terrible. First he complained about game time, and now he wants to go out on loan. I said no. He said fine. Then he said I'm not fine actually. And so he's transfer listed. The biggest indictment of his ability is that he's behind Michailidis in the starting lineup, and Michailidis is a defender who can't tackle. Great hair though. We also have Baba Rahman. 11 goal contributions cannot mask the fact he can't pass, and every time he has the ball, I'm filled with dread. He is likely to be another summer casualty, and Rafa Suarez will get his chance to stake a claim for the starting spot, whilst Baba is away at AFCON. Speaking of AFCON, Truce de Kong and Samatta will also be heading to the Ivory Coast for the January tournament, so these next few weeks might be a struggle. So here's the plan. We need a centre-back to replace Nasberg, a defensive midfielder to replace Odzoev, and a left wing-back to replace Baba. We have a candidate from our recruitment foci who might be perfect for the defensive midfielder slot. August Erlingmark is a ball-winning midfielder currently playing for Atromitus, who incidentally have the best defensive record in the league. He meets the mark in our core DNA attributes, has the versatility to be able to cover at centre-back if needed, and is about to enter his prime. His 50% tackle win rate is a little concerning, but I went back through his recent games against big opposition, where he won every tackle. The most appealing aspect, however, is that his contract expires in the summer. We've offered him a deal, and he'll be arriving in June. I'm also keen for us to bring in a few more Greek players into the senior squad. As it currently stands, we only have 6, and this is an area we can improve. Starting, perhaps, with the unattached Kostas Staphylidis. The 30-year-old left-back started his career at PAOK and has some positional versatility. We've offered him a 6-month contract where he can provide some cover whilst Baba is at AFCON and possibly earn a longer deal. Of course, the transfer window doesn't exist in a vacuum, and we've also got games to play. Stefan Schwab scores his 4th penalty of the season to give us the lead away against the Asteros Tripolis, before setting up Joan Sastre to make it 2-0. It was not a particularly entertaining game, perhaps indicative of two teams returning from a Christmas break. Whilst going through these plans, we've finally seen fit to offer Laratsis the new deal we promised at the end of the season. He's tripled his wages, but €7,500 per week for a regular starter is more than reasonable. More worrying is that Schwab has become the subject of some offers from his homeland, and we must now wait to see what he decides. We've also received an insultingly low bid from Heerenveen for Hickam Canis. Realistically, he's our 5th choice striker, so after a little bit of negotiation, we've got them to bite at €550,000. I of course already have a replacement in mind, and it's another former player. Dimitris Limnios has had a pretty rough time of things since leaving for Germany, but playing as a winger, he's been prolific in limited minutes, and his contract is also due to expire. We've offered a deal, and if it's accepted, we'll then see if we can buy him earlier. But first, a home game against OFI Crete. OFI were the first team to take points of us this season, and so I'm keen for us to get some revenge. This might have been the most stereotypical PAOK game yet. Marcos Antonio scores from an over-engineered short corner routine, then we score a penalty, we go 3-0 up, but concede late on to avoid paying out clean sheet bonuses. All in all, a pretty good showing, and a much needed improvement on our last game. Back to the transfer window, and Captain Viorina has decided to return to Portugal once the season is done. More dishearteningly, our vice-captain has rejected our offer and signed a pre-contract deal with Sturm Graz. A true Schwab story. Guingamp have come in with a bid for Nasberg, which I've happily accepted. That's a lie. They came in with a bid as soon as the transfer window opened. I offered him out in the hope of generating larger bids, which were not forthcoming, and so I've made do with what we can get. That has triggered us bidding for his replacement. Panagiotis Liaris has a similar attribute profile to Nasberg, and better performances, although it must be pointed out he currently plays in the Greek 2nd Division. He's younger, cheaper, Greek, and happy to be a fringe player. He might not necessarily improve the first team, but he'll help us tread water. I've made a very incentive-heavy proposal to his club, €350,000 up front, with the possibility of that doubling if he becomes a regular and breaks into the national team. If he does all that, then even €700,000 will be a bargain. We also have our first arrival of the transfer window. Kostas Staphylidis has accepted our advances and will go straight onto the bench for the evening cup game against Asteros Tripolis. We play them 3 times this month, and whilst we want to proceed in the cup, I have rotated a little. Youngster Stefanos Simas is the biggest beneficiary, as he nets twice to put us in control, before Despodov seals the deal in the 72nd minute. 3-0 is a nice buffer before we go back to their place for the second leg. Staphylidis made his debut, and then came off injured 10 minutes later. Thankfully, it's only minor. More bad transfer news, as Limnios rejected our offer in favour of signing for Getafe. It would have been nice to bring him back to the Tumba, but I completely understand choosing La Liga over the Greek Super League. We're still sanctioning Canis' departure as he heads to the Eredivisie. That'll leave us a little thin up top for a bit, but that just means more opportunities for Simas to build on his great performance against Tripolis. We've also finalised the transfer of Liagas. The fans aren't particularly impressed, but I truly believe this will give us some flexibility come the summer. A home game against Olympiakos next. We took a deserved lead early in the second half when Despodov met Zivkovic's low cross, and that was enough to earn the win. We were fortunate to get a point when we last met, but this was a much improved performance and takes us top of the league, albeit on head-to-head record, and secures our place in the championship group. To bring us back down to earth, Nasberg has rejected Guingamp. because of course he has. Tyson has also agreed a pre-contract deal with Sao Paulo. And we head straight into another game, this time Volos. We haven't played Volos yet this season, but this is the first of back-to-back league games against them. In fact, we play 7 games in January, yet only 4 different opponents. Rafa Suarez gets a double, but is upstaged by Marcos Antonio's top corner perler. The defence once again, ever so graciously, gave up their clean sheet bonus before Despodov races through to add a 4th. A good result and a good performance against the team clinging on to 6th in the league. Guingamp once again come in with an offer for Nasberg. Nasberg once again rejects, and so we'll put him in the proverbial shop window for the second leg of the Greek Cup quarter-finals. Despodov puts us 4-0 up on aggregate in the 17th minute, before Tripolis pull a goal back through Miratello. He then gets across his man, Nasberg, to make it 4-2. Some calamitous defending lets in Simas, before Sito restores Tripolis' lead on the night at the second attempt. Samatta, fresh from Tanzania's awful AFCON campaign, pounces on another mistake to equalise, before Viorina caps off a truly entertaining game from the penalty spot. 18 shots, 3.3 xg, 7 goals. Ridiculous. If Greece has a traditional Big Four, then all of them made the semi-finals. We play Panathinaikos. We're almost through January, but the biggest development was yet to come. Playing attributeless can be very tricky when it comes to hiring staff, especially if, like me, you are very stringent with the tactical preferences of those you bring in. We are still trying to fill our youth coaching positions, and we have a vacancy at Chief Scout. There was, truth be told, only one real candidate all along. A quick peek at his profile, and there's nothing particularly special about his personality. He certainly isn't a great scout, but that's not where the magic lies. A little bit further down, and it all falls into place. It is, of course, Thomas Scharf, the man who is ultimately responsible for our entire philosophy. He's cost us €200,000 in compensation, and whilst he might not be good at the job, he's still worth every penny. And that brings us to the final game, away to Volos. A much tighter affair this time, but Despodov broke the deadlock midway through the second half, meeting Suarez's low cross. An Arlo own goal 8 minutes later gave us a buffer we needed, as Bertoglio pounced while 6 defenders huddled together, doing nothing, at a corner. On the balance of play, we were good value for the win. That brings January to an end, and for the first time since September, we end the month top of the table. AEK have lost 3 of their last 4, and so we now hold that top spot all by ourselves, even if the gap is only 1 point. There was no more activity from us before the transfer window closed, and so our squad to see out the season looks like this. Staphylidis might get a few games at DM to see if he is potentially an upgrade on Odzoev, as this will still be an area of need in the summer. Indeed, if we look ahead to next season, I anticipate the squad looking a little like this. Marios is a player I haven't mentioned at all up until now, as he is currently on loan at Yanina, but looks like he could be a good fit. I'm keen to get Simas a healthy amount of senior game time too, and he could fulfill that link striker role, albeit not as a false 9, once Tyson moves on. We are potentially looking for 3 starters, a linchpin at centre-back, a replacement for Marcos Antonio, and depending on how Erlingmark and Staphylidis get on, a bruising defensive midfielder. And this is what the B-team squad looks like come the end of January.